I'm very honored to be here. I'm more honored now, having met many of you over the course of this afternoon, some of you at the pool, some of you earlier at the opening session, some of you over cocktails, some of you over dinner. It's a really impressive room full of people, and I've said several times here this evening that this is actually part of my job. Like, I get to do this for a living. And, you know, I was talking to my 14-year-old daughter earlier this evening, who recently got into a Jewish green program in Manhattan run out of the JCC, and she applied for it. It was a 10-page application, and she was really happy about getting into it, and I was calling her to tell her how proud I was of her, and I really said to her, you should be here. This is something that you should be at, and so I'm really honored to have been asked. I definitely plan on applying. I don't know if I'll get in. But next year, should I get in, I will definitely return, and I will definitely bring my, at that time, 15-year-old daughter with me. So I've been asked not to speak about, and my Kindle just went off. I have been asked not to speak about the environment or the sustainability green movement, but to talk about a different part of our environment, the cultural environment. So I thought I could start with, and it's about my lecture or my speech or whatever you want to call this, is about diversity and inclusion and how they can create a more sustainable environment for all of us, how those two attributes of our culture really make for a sustainable future. So I thought I could start with some background, where we are as a diverse culture, give you some facts, maybe hopefully not bore you to death with them, but give you the state of the state of diversity in our culture and in our economy, and then move into some specific experiences and examples from my own life, which demonstrate how we might be a more inclusive economy and culture overall. Is that cool? Okay. So let's start in farming. Yes, farming. In agriculture, increasing crop diversity creates an environment that mimics a natural system and yields a more productive harvest. Crop rotation represents diversity in time. Intercropping, where two crops grow in the same field, represents an even more beneficial form of diversity in spatial diversity. And it may seem obvious to us sitting here after hundreds of years of progress in this area that agriculture produces a better yield with diversity. But it took years and years of study to come up with this theory, and then more years of study to prove it. So why am I talking about farming? It's not because I'm from New Jersey. It's because that these things are as true for culture as they are for agriculture. Diversity in experience, in voice, in background has been this country's competitive edge for more than a century, maybe even 2 centuries. It's why we call it the melting pot. This diversity has at times led to conflict, sometimes even adversity. But our distinctly American variety of cultures have created a multifaceted and matchless point of view and a singular competitive advantage on the world stage. That's what makes America great. Our collective diversity, our differences have made us stronger. While we have done much in the way of civil rights in the past 200 years, the truth is that this was an accident. If we attempted to purposefully recreate this cultural collision, again, it would be near impossible, if not impossible. The Industrial Revolution, the northern migration of our African American population, the haphazard immigration from Europe and Latin America and the rest of the globe, combined with 2 world wars, the civil rights movement, a westward expansion, countless other asymmetrical and unpredictable and sometimes imperceptible circumstances created an unplanned, organic, and wonderfully chaotic evolution that created the American personality that you now see. This has created a wonderful place to live. Even more importantly, it has garnered us a really wonderful share, a large share, an outsized share of the most intelligent, creative people on earth, who have in turn created the best education, the greatest armed forces, the most successful economy on the planet. And in fact, the American culture has become our most important, enduring, and perhaps last great export. Our IP, our culture, is what we send the rest of the world right now. And what's interesting is that this national chaotic diversity of time and space, not just progression, but coexistence, has created a natural environment that yields a stronger harvest. America gets more diverse every day. The last census showed that 6 in 10 of the most populated, populous cities in our country are minority majority. Half of the population is expected to be non-white by 2050. Women outnumber men by 5 million people today and growing. By 2030, 20% of our population will be over 65 years old. This is a more diverse culture every single day. In addition to that, the last census puts us at a gay population of somewhere between 5 and 10%, whereas the last Gallup poll puts that figure, according to us, Americans, the average American puts that figure at somewhere between 20 and 25%. That's according to us, our perceived recognition of the gay population. So not only is our diversity our strength, but it's a proven competitive advantage. This year, the American Sociological Review, and please tell me if I'm boring you with data here, but I find it an interesting landscape to paint it against. The American Sociological Review showed that the workplace diversity is among the most important predictors of a business's sales and revenue profitability. The more diverse you are, the more likely you are to succeed. It's a fact, it's not a theory. 95% of those surveyed in a recent Harris Interactive survey of Fortune 500 companies said that their senior management views creating a diverse workforce a major goal. 93% said that diversity is a key business driver, impacting their business goals and their results inside their own organizations. So it's seen as important. It is important. We recognize it. It's been proven. Unfortunately, however, we are not always successful in recreating the natural environment of diversity at all levels of our culture. Several studies, including one from 2003 from the Oklahoma State University and another from the Catalyst Group in 2007, show that spatial equality in the business world is far, far, far from keeping pace with our increasing diversity of our population or our ambitions. There remains a clear, systematic privilege of being straight, white, and male in America. White men hold 72% of the 1,200 plus board seats in the Fortune 100, and men in general hold 83% of these seats. Women hold 17%. White women hold 13%. The overall representation of women and non-white men has not changed at all since 2004 in these board seats. Despite successful case studies at companies as successful as Pepsi-Cola and Walmart, the proportion of white men in managerial positions not only exceeds the representation in the general population, it exceeds their representation in the workplace. With few exceptions, according to a Forbes study from 2007, this disparity increases the higher you go in an organization. It's good to know that diversity and inclusion are valuable. It's wonderful that they've been set as priorities. It's fantastic that companies have metrics that they grade themselves against. But unless the culture of your business is truly inclusive, it may not matter. Nearly 8 in 10 employees responding to a survey by the Network of Executive Women, which is a network of executive women, said they believe, I'm excellent at stating the obvious, said that they believe that white men, so this is nearly 8 in 10, nearly 80% of respondents to this survey, which are not all women, by the way, there were men in this as well, said they believe white men have an advantage in hiring and promotions in the consumer products and retail industry. Okay, so 70% of the respondents were white women, 16% were non-white and Latina females, 12% were white males, just as background. When it came to their own organizations, 2/3, 66% said that in the new survey, respondents said that they believe white men have an advantage when it comes to hiring and promotions. Strangely enough, when asked to explain the reasons for this white male advantage, only 2% said overt bias, only 2%. More than 1/3, 34%, cited unconscious bias. 31% of the respondents said that the blame lay with corporate culture, air quotes. And 17% blamed a lack of female or non-white mentors. America, the culture, is far less diverse than America, the country, especially in our universities and in mid to upper level management positions in our businesses and our government, where the key decisions are made. Despite a promise and desire, who here is against diversity? Despite this desire for racial parity, many of us are guilty of building ghettos around ourselves and around certain levels of our culture and our businesses. That's why this speech, which I waited until this point because I didn't know people would be happy if I came up here and used ghetto culture as a reference. But we each are guilty. A ghetto is not black or white or Latino or Jewish. It is whatever closed community that sectors off one group from another. And there are levels of business and management and industry that create ghettos around themselves. How? Why? If it's not purposeful bias, if it's not, racism or sexism or ageism, how do these walls and ceilings get built? Look around this room. Think about your organization, your department, your senior staff. Are we not more apt to look within our own circles among those we feel most safe for key appointments? Do we not often hire those with whom we feel most at ease, most natural? Is it easy for someone who is different to fit in your organization or your vendors' organizations or your partner organizations? Or do they find a community that says it is invested in diversity, but where it is a little uncomfortable for someone to fit in who doesn't meet certain norms? Our lack of progress in all available measurements shows that diversity and inclusion across both time and space is not yet in the fabric of our ecosystem. This collective blind spot has allowed for generations of subtle yet powerful mechanisms of segregation which have taken an enormous toll, and they threaten to end America's competitive advantage in human capital. If we want to continue to be a leader on the world stage, if we want our culture to remain vital and competitive and sustainable, then we need to destroy the ghetto walls and allow for more diversity in both time and space. There's far too little time here tonight to address all that needs to be done. So for this reason, I will attempt to highlight two of the largest challenges that I see facing our quest for an inclusive business culture and a larger culture. Empathy and agreement. And I will try to demonstrate the two most important and I think easiest to implement tools for rolling back the unconscious bias and creating a truly diverse and sustainable environment, and that is exposure and access. But first, I want to ask you a few questions, because I got that idea earlier today. How many here are straight white men? Raise your hand. I'm not trying to out anybody here today. Well, maybe a few people, you especially. So straight white men, okay. So now how many here are white women? White women. These are very uncomfortable questions for a Jew from New York to ask. How many people here consider themselves of color, a person of color? How many people here consider themselves openly gay? Now, this is for all the four groups. What was that? What did I? You don't know? I didn't ask about undecided. That's a whole nother lecture. And how many here think? No, I'm sorry. So how many here, amongst all the groups I just asked questions of, consider yourselves the majority in the senior staff within your organization? Majority. If you're a woman, that means you're in the majority of women. Now, look around the room. Well, now, how many of you during your career have felt, now here's a different question, all four groups. How many of you have felt during your career compelled to change or alter your personal style in order to conform to the workplace in which you live? One last question. If you've had a recent search, or if you've had a search at your organization, how many times have you heard the phrase, well, we've tried to find a diverse candidate, but we just can't find somebody who's ultimately qualified? Raise your hand if you've ever heard that. These are the central challenges to a diverse culture, having to alter. Let me take a second here for a second. I want to make this clear. I like white men. Some of my best friends are white men. I know that's hard to believe. But even white men can fall victim to unconscious bias. The problem is, it's true. I will show you in a second how that is true. I promise you. But you have to stay. The problem is the ghettos we build around ourselves and our own communities and our own unconscious bias. If we are to effect true change throughout our culture and our economy, everyone needs to be vested in the success of the process, even the white men who currently hold much, if not perhaps too much, of the power. I've been fortunate to have had the opportunity to work with and learn from a wide range of talented and visionary people about how to accelerate the evolution and promote a diverse and sustainable culture and break down the ghetto walls which we build around ourselves. In any environment, especially higher education or at work, those in the majority feel very little compunction about being themselves or doing what comes naturally. But think about this. In most workplaces, married straight men would not think twice about putting up a picture of their family or talking about what they did over the weekend in a meeting. However, would it be unusual for a gay man or a gay woman to feel at least a moment of insecurity about doing the same thing? Think about this. A woman who does manage to reach management level at their company is typically surrounded by white men. Isn't it more normal for her to be a little bit more conscious about what she says and about how she acts? Julie Hamilton, who's the president of Global Walmart team for Coca-Cola, put it, this isn't just because she's a woman, but because she is the only one in a group and is more the center of attention. It's easier to be called out because she's very visible. This is true for the majority of women and non-white or gay men and women who report feeling pressure to alter their personality in order to fit in within their management environment. The higher they go in the organization, the more they feel outnumbered in meetings and therefore intimidated into being someone different or perhaps a little less than they naturally are. While white men are often oblivious to the benefits they receive from this institutional bias, they too receive bias. They are seen as automatically unsympathetic to the efforts towards diversity, or worse, as a monolithic group who acts and should be treated uniformly the same. These biases exacerbate the gaps between the groups, and they weaken the communication between all of the groups, and it removes the quickest route to integration through the seat of power. No matter how diverse your workforce, if everyone doesn't feel safe to express themselves and is vested in creating an inclusive environment, change will come hard, and it will not last. A lack of empathy among all groups stems from a deficit of a common language and experience or agreement. Increase the understanding between various groups, and empathy will increase. Increase empathy, and agreements will be made. Diverse portions of your culture will coexist more naturally. The second problem, someone said bullshit over there when I said it's hard to find a diverse candidate. Well, the current workforce is a good indicator of the future. Think about this. It is true. It's difficult to find a good, diverse candidate within certain industries. There's a dearth of pipeline. Even today, it is not unusual to hear, well, we've looked, but... And that institutional bias makes it easy to go, okay, hire the white guy. A few years ago, I was on a panel for an organization called NAMIC, the National Association for Multiculturalism in Cable. And on the panel were two presidents of cable networks who both also happened to be black. During the course of the panel, each of them individually said, when it came time to hire new employees, this is the cable industry, which is a very white industry. They had to turn over countless rocks to find, that was the phrase, countless rocks to find diverse candidates. And even then, it was very, very difficult. So when it came time for me to speak, I turned to them and I said, If the president of BET is having trouble finding diverse candidates, what the fuck am I supposed to do? I have no doubt each of us wants to be more diverse. The question is not only how to find qualified and diverse candidates, but how to ensure there is not this dearth in the first place. The secret is, the dirty secret is, by the time we're looking for a candidate, it's too late. There is no access to good jobs by diverse candidates. There is no exposure of those candidates to people in power. How can we expect there to be change made? So how do we change this? Well, exposure and access lead to empathy and agreement. In my experience, extended exposure and open access allow cultures to collide, which leads to a shared experience and the potential for a common language. Common language is the key to empathy. And when you have that, then there is this greater closeness amongst all the groups. Exposure over time allows for proximity and understanding. So now I'm going to take you through some of the examples in my world. Over my career, I've had the good fortune of working with some genius people who have taught me important lessons about taking down these ghetto walls. The first was my first black boss. George C. Wolfe was the producer and authority of the Public Theater a number of years ago, and I was hired there by him to become the director of marketing. And when you're a white Jewish kid from South Jersey, having a black boss is a new thing. And if you want to be empathetic to the black experience, stand on a street corner in New York City and watch your boss, who's black, try to get a cab. He couldn't. And this is a 2-time Tony Award winner who directed Angels in America. So I learned a lot just from being immersed in that culture. I was exposed to it, and therefore I became more empathetic to it. And what we set out to do over the ensuing couple of years at the Public Theater and the New York Shakespeare Festival was tear down the walls. He educated me. There's black theater, there's spick theater, there's chick theater, and then there's white theater. And we are going to rip down the walls of all of them and let them collide in the lobby of the Public Theater. We want the lobby and the audiences of the Public Theater to look like the subway. And so we did. We tore down all the taboos. We collided culture. We made theater look different. No more Westchester 50-year-old white woman theater. That was what he wanted to destroy. It's not that we didn't want them to come, but we wanted them to sit next to people that they had never met before and see things that they had never met before. And we changed the landscape. George changed it. I marketed it. We changed it. We made theater that was uncomfortable. It was difficult. It exposed the raw nerve of the divide between each of us. And then there was this cacophony in the lobby. It was stupendous. It was amazing. It looked different, it felt different. It wasn't always great, but it was always challenging, and it helped create an exposure in the audience, between audiences, that had heretofore not existed. And then we took on Shakespeare. Boy, did we fuck with this. We went to Central Park, and it was a multicultural Brazilian set version of The Tempest, starring the whitest guy on earth, Patrick Stewart. Make it show. But a multicultural cast for a free piece of theater in Central Park that created, again, this collision of cultures, on stage and off. Shakespeare, when you can make Shakespeare an opportunity for exposure of cultures, you've done something new and different. And then George and I, this is a billboard that compared a show that didn't have a name yet to a chorus line, one of the great bastions of white Broadway. And that's Savion Glover, who's an artist. And they got together in the same theater where Chorus Line was created and wrote a new piece of theater called Bring Into Noise, Bring Into Funk. And George and I had a huge argument over the name of that show, which I lost. I said, white people will not see a show called Bring Into Noise, Bring Into Funk. And he said, White people will see this show because you're white and you're going to tell them to see it. And we opened off Broadway, and it was a smash hit. I mean, it was like a meteor through the theater community, and we ripped up the city with the images. This thing was a revelation, a tap rap history on the staying power of the beat. And he showed from slavery to modern day what it was like to be a young black man in this country. And every time I saw it, that happened. It won 4 Tony Awards. It changed theater dramatically, and it changed a generation of young theater artists. We looked differently from that point on at everything we did. This taught me how to market this show. I started my own company called Forefront, and I got to market a show called Freak. And there we let tickets go for cash only, no credit cards, for $10 day of show. Why? Because the young Latino and racially mixed crowds who would love to see John Leguizamo on Broadway didn't use credit cards. They went to the clubs with $10 crumpled up in their pockets, and that's what they paid for. And if there wasn't a ticket available that night, they wouldn't go. And that was it. So we held tickets off for sale. Best seats in the house, by the way. Best seats in the house. And you could show up that night with cash only and buy tickets. And the audience was just this wonderful mix. So what I learned from George there, I carried with me the rest of my career. A few years ago, I was asked to join the board of an organization called the Ghetto Film School. And the Ghetto Film School is a nonprofit organization in the South Bronx that teaches young men and women of any color, of any background, not at risk, who want to realize their full potential, how to make film. And you have to apply. It's a rigorous process. It was founded by a young man named Joe Hall, who is a visionary. And you apply, you go intensively over the summer, and then there's they select themselves. They write a script, they choose their own director, they elect the screenwriter themselves, and then they go to a foreign land and shoot a film. Brazil, Paris, Mexico City, and then last year we went to Uganda. And so I'm just going to show, we're making a documentary at the Sundance Channel about this experience. We've graduated 400 students. The high school graduation rate of the students, this is not a high school program per se, it's an after-school program. The high school graduation rate of the students is 100%, just twice the city average of New York City. The college acceptance is 85% of that 100%. Which is unheard of. Many of these kids, it's the first time anyone in their family has gone to college. But the most important thing is they're meeting directors, they're meeting producers. They come to my office and they pitch me film ideas, and I rip them a new one when they're not prepared. It's access, it's exposure, it's merit. These people, they have to be good or they fail. This is not about propping up somebody who doesn't deserve it. So this is a really good example, and this fall, I know I'm going to run a couple of seconds over. In this fall, we opened the world's first public high school for cinema in the South Bronx, called the Cinema School. Brand new public school with the public of education, brand new school, brand new facilities, and it's going to change people's lives, not because they're going to get to make film. I believe in the power of film, but I also believe that showing somebody how to learn a new skill is a much better thing than saying, oh, poor child. And that's what the Ghetto Film School does. Where we met, I was at, also for NAMIC, I did a master class, and what happens is I get to lecture at colleges and speak to 40 kids at a time, and that's the end of it. And one of the problems in our industry is that we don't know where the young, diverse candidates are, and we don't get to them early enough for them to consider communications as a career. So they don't know about us, and we don't know about them. How can we possibly hire them? So I established a master class at a cable conference where 65 students of color from the DC area, in this case, came and had a whole day master class with about 50 or 60 executives from the cable industry, where the cable executive said, this is how you get a job. This is what a resume should look like. These are the people you call. These are the classes you should take. There was exposure. There was comfort. There was a shared common language, and bonds were made that will last. They start as a junior in college. That's how you reach diverse candidates. You don't put an ad on Monster. It doesn't work. Believe me, I look at my own organization, and it doesn't work. You have to start early. You have to start planting the seeds. Someone made an analogy earlier to me today is when you're hungry, you can't go plant a seed. You have to have planted the seed long before you're hungry. The last part I'd like to wrap up with is the role of media and the environment that we have as a country. Too often in this country, the media paints minorities and women and gays as this funny sidekick, humorous person, or the pimp or the drug dealer or whatever, and the positive role models in media are done in a kind of after-school specialty sort of way, and it's really not effective. No one can emulate the saint. You can only fall down in comparison. And so what we tried to do this fall at Sundance Channel was create a documentary that showed a town where race and class and generation were colliding and struggling with the hard stuff. Nobody was perfect, but everybody had a human element that was understandable and relatable. That show was called Brick City. It was a 5-part, hour-long documentary. It aired on Sundance Channel. It's actually airing again. There's no way, had I not worked for George and been exposed to that culture and learned from the inside what that looks like, that I would have greenlit that. There's just no way. You don't understand what is at stake until you've walked in the shoes of someone else. Empathy comes from exposure and proximity. Agreement comes from being at the same table and making an inclusive society that is truly comfortable for those that are different. Access creates opportunity. These are the watchwords. That wasn't a Newark story. That wasn't a black story. That wasn't a white story. That was an American story. That's the struggle that we all face right now. So when you sit at the boardroom table, when you sit in the senior staff meeting, look around. What's it look like? What's it feel like? Try to put yourself in those other shoes and think about how your society, your culture can be more diverse, more inclusive, more comfortable for people that don't look like you. Because without that mix, without that collision, we are lost. We will fail. Take down the walls. These are the thought leaders right here. You have the opportunity. Make it happen. That's it. Thank you.